Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for staying. It's been a long couple of days, but I'm really honored and privileged to be able to deliver to you the solution for all the problems that we've been talking about for the last 2 days. Thank you. I am a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital and a child health researcher, and as you heard, the founding director of the Digital Wellness Lab. But I've been working on the interface between screens and the physical, mental, and social health of children for more than 30 years. From back in the days of television. Remember television, that box that used to be in the living room? And early on, we were very concerned about the effects of television watching on children. Are they becoming couch potatoes? Are they becoming fat and stupid and, violent in front of the television screen? And one of the interesting things, I have to confess, is that I spent my wicked youth in the film industry. I was a screenwriter and filmmaker for 12 years before I had a midlife crisis that drove me to medical school. Talk about a midlife crisis, it really wrecks your life up. Anyway, but one of the things that I realized as we were starting to get concerned about the screens is that there was this adversarial attitude going on, like screens are evil, they got to get them out of the house, get them out of the bedroom, whatever. And having come from the world of making media, first of all, I was aware that those who were making media were not out to hurt children. They weren't the enemy. In fact, many of them had children themselves and cared about kids. And the other part of it was that we were making recommendations based on very thin research at that time. And so I developed a research center at Boston Children's where we started looking at what's really going on in positive as well as negative ways with children watching television at that time. And of course, we found some positive as well as negative. I mean, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers. There were good things that were going on in television. And we took a step back and said, let's think about how we can learn to live with television, because calling it bad and trying to get rid of it, it's not going to happen. Right? So we basically started working on how to develop ways to live in healthy ways with screens. And in the midst of all of that, something called the internet happened. Social media happened, even mobile phones happened. And toward the end of our time, I was being put in meetings like this with someone from the tech industry or the entertainment industry so they could watch us argue. And what I would argue about is not that you're doing evil things to young people, but as you might imagine, the tech industry would send out somebody from their, basically the PR department, right, or their marketing department to say all the way, pay defense against me. But I would say, you've got to stop talking about internet safety. And they go, what? Why should I stop? I'm on your side. I'm trying to do good things. I said, but when you talk about internet safety, you are presuming the internet is unsafe. And kids are going to be in the internet anyway. We should not teach them that it's to be feared, that it's to be defended against. We have to teach them to master it, and it's a powerful tool. Let's teach them to master it the way we teach them to master another powerful tool, an automobile. We don't teach them to drive by saying, don't run over people, don't hit that tree. We teach them to drive, and in the process, they learn to be safer. So after having these kind of discussions, many times I was in a car driving back to an airport with the head of global safety for then Facebook, now Meta. And she said to me, Michael, why do you keep hammering me and saying I'm doing the wrong thing? We are in an industry that is intensely competitive, intensely secretive, and utterly convinced that we are the smartest person in the room. We have to talk to each other about this because it's the only place of shared risk. And I said, whoa, wait a second. If you're talking to each other, what about working with each other? not only about working with each other, but why don't we get out of this adversarial, polarized environment where the pediatricians and child defenders on one side are saying you're doing terrible things to kids, and this people in charge of screens, whether it be tech or entertainment, are saying freedom of expression, and everybody just argues and comes to a stalemate. I said, well, what if we were to create a place that was built on good, solid scientific evidence, where we could put a pediatrician next to a software engineer, next to a neuroscientist, next to a screenwriter, and have them bring their respective skill sets to bear on what is, after all, a shared ecosystem, a shared situation where we were going to have to learn to live with it one way or the other, and we're getting nowhere by butting heads. And so that was the origin of the Digital Wellness Lab, which is where we're doing exactly that. So one of the things that has come out of that is something that we call the Inspired Internet Pledge. And is it up there? It's up there. Okay, so the Inspired Internet Pledge has 3 components to it. And this is something we are handing to the industries, the tech industry, the entertainment industry, and saying, this is not binding. We don't want your lawyers to get upset about this. This is aspirational. These are the hopes that we have for each other. And there are 3 parts to it. And this was announced actually almost a year ago at Cannes. And it has been growing in momentum since. And those 3 principles are to tune your product for well-being, for emotional well-being of those who use it, to listen to and act on those who have experienced harm, and thirdly, to share information on what works, what humanizes this product, and also what doesn't work. Now, as you might imagine, that third one is the hardest one for a lot of industries because they don't share data easily. But let's talk them through. The first one, tune for emotional well-being. Create a product that you would want your child to be experiencing, to be working with. The second one is to listen to and, as importantly or more importantly, act on what we hear from those who experienced harm instead of denying, pretending it's not there, etc. And thirdly, to talk openly with each other, because you're all in charge of this environment, all in charge. You're the ones who can make the change. People like me can't make the change. We can do research and we can say, here's what the research shows, it's terrible. But unless someone on the other side says, okay, we'll do something about it, we don't move the ball down the field. And in fact, as I'm sure you're all well aware, there is a huge lawsuit coming from the attorneys general of most of the states in the United States against Meta. And believe me, TikTok and Google and all of them are waiting in line behind it, watching what happens with this. And they're using as the model the master settlement agreement around tobacco. But to my mind, that is a huge waste of money that could be applied to really understanding what's going on and doing something about it instead of paying high-priced lawyers. Forgive me, all the lawyers in the house. So I want to introduce you to my bosses in this effort.
Is it can or con? Can? Can, okay. You know, back when my grandparents or great-grandparents, like smoking, you know, when you were like 8 or something, it was like fine to just have a pack of cigarettes or to be smoking or whatever. And years later, we found out how detrimental and how bad it really is. And I think the same thing is with screens. We kind of grew up with a cell phone stuck in front of our faces or behind a computer screen for hours on end without really understanding the negative consequences until it's too late.
Younger teens are on social media a lot and usually have little to no guidance about how they're using it. They might see like degrading comments, fat shaming, bullying, and I think that also does take a toll on people's mental health, especially teenagers and young kids.
People don't have the filters that come with like being in real life and having to look someone in the eye and tell them something mean.
People find comfort in being, you know, behind an LED screen and being able to hurl insults at people rather than, you know, saying it to their face.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure to put out like nice looking posts mostly online.
If you like stand up and look in the mirror and you don't see this like perfect figure that is like everyone else is kind of portraying of themselves, you're gonna start to cultivate some sort of like self-loathing or self-hate from that.
I feel like most apps or social media platforms can be addictive.
It really creates like an echo chamber of like the same ideas or the same concepts over and over again. A more inspired internet could just be healthier for all the users.
People, you know, are posting things in a way to gain creativity, to show their creativity, their artwork or their skill or maybe a hobby that's really unique to them.
I would really love to see other people who look like me, so like Asian Americans or Asian people in general.
Where people feel like they're not judged without feeling like they're comparing themselves to others and just being content in who they are.
Maybe not so much of an emphasis on entertainment or trying to keep people on an app or a social media site. A lot of those people who run those companies now haven't grown up with technology as much in their lives as we have.
I think what tech companies need to do to kind of be able to progress the digital landscape positively is to begin to sow the seeds for how we should be interacting with each other online. We've had hundreds and thousands of years to observe how humans interact with each other in person, but only a little bit more than a couple of decades to be able to see how we interact with each other online.
And I'm quite serious when I say these are my bosses. These are members of a student advisory council that convenes over an academic year, both to explore what's going on, look at the research, and then they meet with C-suite leaders of tech companies at the end of the year to present their findings and their recommendations, which is wonderful for the kids. And interestingly, it's wonderful for the executives also. But I now want to introduce two very powerful women who you've met already, but who are going to change the world. They are Larissa May of Half the Story and Elizabeth Malovadoff of Digital Parenting Coach. And Elizabeth is going to question us.
This is so exciting. Okay. So, really happy that everybody is still here with us. I'm going to I think we have, what, 20 minutes? So let's really get to the core of it. Yeah? Because I think that what has been so crucial about hearing about the Internet Pledge is the Inspired Internet Pledge is just this idea of creating this movement, right? And we're trying to get this ecosystem. So I still think it's kind of crucial to unpack some of this, Rich. Michael, I always want to call you Rich, you know that.
Yeah.
So the first one is the Tune for Emotional Wellbeing, where tech companies commit to understanding which actions and content correlate with well-being outcomes and build products, services, policies accordingly. Dr. Michael, please unpack some of that for us.
Well, on the simplest level, it's as I described at the beginning. What would you want your child to spend time with? How would you want your child to feel after spending time with this? And what do you want them to do after spending time with this? In many ways, it's the question you ask of any advertiser, right? Mm-hmm. About how they want their product to be seen. In a deeper sense, what we are suggesting is that in order to create a sustainable business in this social media environment, they need to take better care of their consumers, who are, in many ways, their product also. And that they need to think a little more clearly about having a second bottom line, and that is the physical, mental, and emotional wellness of those who use their product.
Okay, now while I'm loving this, we know that companies are profit maximizers, and so they're not always thinking about this, but if they're signed up for your Inspired Internet Pledge, and they're agreeing with this, what's it going to look like in practice?
I think it's going to look different for each company depending on what they do and the way they do it. And quite honestly, I think it's going to be a work in progress, not only at the beginning, but always as the ecosystem evolves, et cetera. I think what really it's going to be about is convincing them that they need to have a sustainable business model. And to have a sustainable business model, they have to hold on to their customers. What's happening with legislation often is they're equating it to big tobacco. Big tech is big tobacco. Big tobacco has a problem with their business model, which is that they lose 7 million of their customers worldwide every year, right? That means they have to replace that many just to stay even. Now, unlike tobacco, this is not a product that is toxic while used as directed. But if they are, realizing, or the consumers are realizing that they're being harmed by this, or the way that they behave with it is harming them, they will go away, right? So I think that what we're really trying to say to them is, let's keep your business model going by taking care of the people who are, frankly, supporting you.
Which makes a lot of sense, and I already have seen that 2 of your signatories have been TikTok and Pinterest, and Pinterest would have been here with us, but we missed out, unfortunately, right. But still, it was great support from Wendy. I do think that having, these types of significant industry players signing up, that this is a really good sign, and on all the different calls that we've been on, you've always been championing for children and digital well-being. How are you able to continue to push it?
Irrepressible optimism and a belief that humans will be human to each other.
Right. Okay, so that's for the humans, but for the companies, do you think there's ever going to be a moment where, I mentioned earlier about Instagram and Snapchat with their family centers. So a lot of companies have, made steps and have made strides, but is there a moment where they might get complacent and when they might say, listen, we've done enough?
I think they're already complacent.
Oh, okay. What do you mean by that?
And I think that I think they need to rethink what's going on with that, because they do their own little thing, and they try to make it about why, one is better than the other by doing their own little thing. Here's the reality: parents don't use those tools.
Right.
Parents really don't use them. They're up there for window dressing. They're up there for the optics, the CSR, but not taking true social responsibility for the society. And so that's what I challenge them on. I mean, the reality is, look at their websites. They bury these things deep in their websites. And because every one of them says, we've got the best program, parents believe none of them.
Well, I think it's great that you're out there and you're still challenging them because you're able to be vocal in some areas where I cannot always be. So I really, really appreciate it. But now I'm going to turn to the second principle. I'm going to turn to you, Larissa, please. So the second principle of the Inspired Internet Pledge: listen to and act on insights from people who have experienced harm online. I think that we have seen in the media a lot of things happening, at least in my own world, in the UK with the Online Safety Act. In the United States, you may have seen Congress with all the different family members holding up the pictures of people who had been harmed by social media. But I think we're starting to hear more about the people that have truly been harmed. So my question to you, Larissa, is, given your direct experience with digital harm, can you share some examples of how gathering these kinds of insights has informed and perhaps even helped your own organization's strategies?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, what we do at Half the Story is try to break the echo chamber and build an ecosystem, and that's why I'm so
okay. Wait, stop. Explain echo chamber. Explain echo chamber.
So in a lot of this work, I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years. It's very easy to point fingers, to get negative headlines, and to share stories, but not have them go anywhere. And at this moment in time, we've just lost so many lives and seen these companies profit so much that we have to change the way that we're doing this. And so at Half the Story, what we specialize in is youth-centric co-design and listening. So everything that we do is a research-informed process, not only to help build our programming, but also to help translate the negative impacts to these companies. One very clear example that we've been working on is cyberbullying. And we've been sidetracking the storytelling with direct contact to the companies and policy. So let me talk about what that looks like in practice.
Please.
In California, we're working on a bill that ultimately would require a tech platform to respond within 48 hours if a child was cyberbullied and reported that content. Why that happened was we started to hear about, with AI, how deepfakes were being made of our children, and I was getting stories about that every week. One story in particular, the child actually had 7 out of their 9 college applications rescinded. They have death threats outside of their house. And in seeing that, and seeing how quickly that tech was changing, and that a mean comment was no longer a mean comment, but a deepfake, and a child really has no control over their digital identity or footprint, we realized that we had to do something. And so while we're thrilled that this bill is moving forward in California, we didn't stop there. We said, how can we make this happen as fast as possible and not just have it be waiting for the whole legislative session? So what we actually did on the back end was take some of our kids who were harmed and called some of these tech platforms and said, hey, just so you know, we're putting this bill forward. What can you do about it? Can you get behind it? Because if you as a tech company get behind it, you're going to inspire other companies to get behind it. And what would the world look like if we could make this happen without having to spend a bunch of money going to legislators to make this happen?
What happened? What happened? Tell us.
So we're still in the process. But what I will say is that some of the tech platforms that we've spoken to said, absolutely, get it a little bit further down the line, and we'll come out and we'll support this bill.
That's great.
And that is where change happens.
Right. I love it. I absolutely do. And I think that this is what we're talking about, this movement and this action. But I also know that Half the Story teaches teens how to flourish in the digital age. And we already have been talking about this, educating young people about the relationship between their emotional health and their digital habits. You have something special with Social Media U, which brings digital metacognition, and you know I'm going to ask you to define metacognition, to schools to improve overall well-being. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the simplest way to say this is that digital wellness is an inside job. That might be a paradox because we're here talking about screens and the future of technology, but what we have learned from working and sitting with our kids, but also from my own experience, is that oftentimes how we're feeling impacts what we're doing in the digital world. So for many of our kids, if they're feeling sad or disappointed, they pick up their phone because they can numb out. And instead of actually dealing with those emotions, they're using the digital world to escape from them. And so what we do within our programming is actually teach kids how to connect the dots between things like self-compassion, emotional granularity, the practice of actually naming emotions and how specific content impacts your feelings, so that they can have more emotional agency in the digital age. But the thing that makes us different is that we're all rooted in play, creativity, and fun. One would argue that we're in the midst of moral panic about these devices. These kids don't need any more negativity than already exists.
Agreed.
The antithesis of inspiration is apathy, and everything that we do is about gamifying, building human experiences, and we actually have a human game designer, and we play test with teens every single month.
I love it.
To make sure that what we're doing brings inspiration, because that is the only way forward.
And what about listening, actually listening to the teens?
Oh, I have learned so much, and one of the greatest things I've learned is it's not about what you say, it's about what you listen to. And with young people, a lot of where Half the Story began was my story and creating circles on college campuses to hear how young people were impacted by tech. And everything that we do at Half the Story, as Dr. Rich said, the teens are my bosses. They are the heartbeat and the drumbeat. I am merely here to represent their perspectives to ensure that in every single room where a decision is being made about them, there is a young voice there. And for us, that listening looks like a lot of things. It looks like social media listening to the trends and the challenges that young people are facing. It means listening to the content that young people are putting out to the world, because it tells us a lot about the cultural changes and the issues that they're dealing with. But it also is about listening in real life settings, in the classroom, through things like screen-free recess, screen-free prom, and giving teens agency, the keys, the tools, and the money to actually gather teens themselves. Because I could sit here until I'm blue in the face, but if teens are not bought into the programs or the things that you're creating in the world, there will be no change. Exactly. And there will be no research to back that change. And I know that that's the one thing I've learned in this work.
I love it. Life's lessons as well as stories. But can you share a specific case study? Do you have anything that talks about where listening to harmed individuals then set about with some positive change?
Yes. So one of my favorite parts about our program, the program is an in-school and after-school program that is between a quarter and a semester. The best part of the program is that at the end of it, we actually have a section where the teens come together, talk about the greatest harms in their communities, and actually go and design the policies for their schools. Wow. And build a student body board that helps admin deal with challenges that are happening online. Because a lot of times, there's only half of the story that's being told to the administrators. And a lot of the times they're dealing with kids and punishing kids who might not even need to be punished, but also who might need more emotional support than punishment. And so one very clear example that we saw in a school recently was that there was a lot of discrimination going on the internet. And some of our kids felt that their teachers had such stringent rules around when they could use their devices. But there was one child in particular that every time there was a school event, there would be a camera in front of his face because he was a student of color. And they would put his photo on the homepage, on the social media accounts, and it was really emotionally challenging for him because he did not want that. Yeah. What made them think that they could tell kids not to use their devices but put his face on everything? And so within that, he started to really develop a number of emotional health challenges. But the power of that was that he shared that in this class, and his classmates came together and said, you know what, let's put something forward so that our teachers have to ask us to use our faces on our media and that we need to sign consent forms. And that one small change made a huge difference in not only his life, but showed the teens that they had the power to make a difference in their own world.
I love it. And that's something that I heard in my workshop yesterday, of giving kids the power to choose. And it's just brilliant. I'm seeing the time is going so quickly, and I want to keep you here, Larissa, for a while. But I have one more question for you. And half the story, you call yourselves pro-tech pioneers, saying that a world that thrives with technology is possible. So talk to me about this. What does this mean, and how does this work with the Inspired Internet Pledge?
So within our work at Half the Story, all of our programming is strengths-based. So instead of focusing on the kids' deficits, we focus on their superpowers in the real world and how they can translate into the digital world. And why that is so important is because of the Inspired Internet Pledge. It's all about empowering companies and also humans to have agency online. And so all of our programming is teaching kids how to be in the shoes of an engineer. What does it look like to strip tech of all the things that keep you hooked or impact your mental health, instead of just being a victim? And that mindset is the difference between surviving and thriving.
There we go. She just dropped a bombshell. I love it. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. Dr. Michael, take us home with this last question, last few questions on the last principle of the Inspired Internet Pledge. And this one, it ties them all together. Share lessons collaboratively, committing to sharing best practices, key research findings, and creative solutions to make the internet a healthier place for everyone, especially young people. So tell us what this principle looks like in practice, and I'm going to add another question. Have some of these shared insights led to real-world changes?
What this is about augmenting their business model. It's about enriching it and making it about how are we influencing and changing the lives and the health of those whom we both serve and sell, which is the model for social media, of course. And I think that, first of all, the world is now clued into the fact that they are treating us as the product, right? And while that has engendered a lot of anger and fear, that anger and fear isn't getting us anywhere. And all it's doing is leading to a siege mentality for them, and they're just throwing money at it to try to make it go away. Instead, what we're saying is, let's understand that you are changing more than your profit line here. You are changing society. You are changing history. And you want to be on the right side of history if you want to be around. in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And so we're saying, let's take a step back and let's look at how people are changed. They're already doing that to a certain degree, where they study what you buy from when they advertise and study how you behave or how you vote. Let's take it a step bigger and make this a public health issue, which in fact it is. In fact, behavioral health has become more important than physical health in terms of actual dollars and productivity lost due to behavioral health, mental health issues. And so what we are asking them to do, voluntarily, not because anybody's demanding it, and for all the important work that's being done in legislation and litigation, from my perspective as a pediatrician, it's too slow. It's too slow to help the kids right now.
Right.
And we need to be active right now. And as the Hopi elders said at the turn of the millennium, we are the people we've been waiting for. We're the ones who can make a difference. And we need to get that information not just in their, in their profit line, but get the information of who we as individuals and as a people, as a humanity are.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to say, as somebody who's on your advisory council for Digital Wellness Lab, I have seen you advocating for this and doing this. And so it does bring me to the lab. How does the Digital Wellness Lab facilitate collaboration between different stakeholders?
They don't play well with each other. I'll be honest about it. And in fact, that's been one of the hardest things about getting them on board with the Inspired Internet Pledge, for example. So we say, you don't have to play with each other, just play with us. Okay. And we will play with everybody. So, I mean, it is sort of simple playground economics, if you will. And I think also what's happening as these companies recognize the long-term sort of value of what we're suggesting, the more that they, jump on. And, I sort of describe them as all standing on the edge of the pool, watching to see who, they don't want to be the first to jump in the pool, but they also don't want to be the last. Right. So they want to be second or third. And that's kind of what's happening, particularly now that we have Pinterest and TikTok on board. That the other bigs are saying, oh, wow, maybe we should be there.
Yeah. Well, so I completely understand that complacency is not an option here. And I really appreciate all the work that you do. And same with you, Larissa. And with just a few seconds left, I would love to ask both of you if there is one word or a phrase of inspiration that you would like to give to the audience, especially with your work, Half the Story, and for you, the Inspired Internet Pledge. So I'll go with you first, Larissa.
We can't save the world through fear.
Wow, she had that prepared.
Right. That was more than one word.
I said or phrase.
I'm going with one word.
I said a word or a phrase. I did.
But I'm going to go with hope.
Hope. Okay, now you got to add more with the phrase.
Okay. Well, hope is something we dream about, but hope needs to be empowered by action. And if we have a hope, if we have a North Star that we are guiding toward, we will never achieve perfection. That doesn't mean we shouldn't keep perfecting ourselves every day.
Perfect. So I just want to say thank you to both of you. Thank you, the audience, for letting us moderate.
Thank you.
I believe that please stay seated because the closing remarks are coming soon. And I would also say, reach out to all of us on LinkedIn. This is what we do, and creating this movement and keeping this energy is what we love.